Now that your wife is dead, grieve, pack your bags, and never come back, my son-in-law exclaimed at dinner, and my daughter just smiled and nodded. The house was never really yours anyway. I left, but not to pack my bags, but to the bank and unfolded my plan. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The fork trembled in my hand as I stared across the dining table. 7 days since Martha's funeral. 7 days of expecting comfort from the children we'd raised, loved, sacrificed for. Instead, Perry leaned back in his chair like he owned the place. Harold. His voice cut through the silence sharp as winter wind. We need to talk. Sienna wouldn't meet my eyes. My daughter, who used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms, now fidgeted with her wedding ring like it burned her finger. The roast beef I'd prepared grew cold between us. What's on your mind, son? The word felt foreign. Perry had never been a son to me, just the man who'd stolen my little girl's heart 12 years ago. This house. He gestured around our dining room, the room where Martha had hosted countless family dinners, where Sienna had blown out birthday candles, where memories lived in every corner. It's too big for one person. My chest tightened. I've lived here 23 years. Exactly. Perry's smile held no warmth. Time for a change. Sienna and I, we need space. Real space. Not that cramped apartment we're stuck in. I looked to my daughter, searching for the compassion I'd raised her with. She stared at her plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Sienna? My voice cracked. She finally lifted her head. Those blue eyes, Martha's eyes, looked through me like I was already gone. Perry's right, Dad. This place it's too much for you now. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Too much, as if 23 years of mortgage payments, of maintaining every inch of this home for my family, meant nothing. As if I was some burden to be managed. Where exactly do you expect me to go? I set down my fork before it could betray more of my shock. Perry leaned forward, predator sensing weakness. Senior living, assisted care, somewhere, appropriate for your age. Appropriate, I repeated the word, tasting its bitterness. Dad, you're 67. Sienna's voice carried forced patience, like she was explaining simple math to a child. Mom's gone. You shouldn't be rattling around this big house alone. Rattling around? Like I was some loose part in a machine that needed fixing. Perry stood, pacing to the window that overlooked Martha's rose garden. Look, Harold, we're being practical here. You sell this place, downsize to something manageable, everyone wins. Everyone wins? The phrase echoed in my head. Everyone except the man who'd built this life, brick by brick. You could have a nice little apartment. Sienna's words rushed together now, rehearsed lines delivered poorly. No maintenance, no worries. Freedom. Freedom. They were repackaging exile as liberation. I studied my daughter's face, searching for traces of the girl who'd once defended injured birds, who'd cry if she accidentally stepped on flowers. That girl had vanished, replaced by this stranger wearing her features. And if I refuse? Silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Perry returned to his seat, straightening his shoulders like a man preparing for battle. Dad, Sienna's voice hardened, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. More difficult, as if my attachment to the home I'd shared with my wife for over 2 decades was mere stubbornness. Perry cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the quiet room. His next words landed like hammer blows on glass. Now that your wife is dead, grieve, pack your suitcases, and never come back. The brutality of it stole my breath. Martha, reduced to your wife, as if 38 years of marriage was just some temporary arrangement. Dead. Pack. Never come back. Each word calculated to wound. I waited for Sienna to gasp, to protest, to show some fragment of the daughter I'd raised. Instead, she nodded. Perry's right, Dad. It's time. Something inside me crystallized in that moment. Not broke. Crystallized. Like water freezing into something harder, colder, more purposeful. I stood slowly, my legs steadier than they'd been in days. I see. 2 words, that's all I managed. 2 words that held 38 years of marriage, 23 years in this house, 67 years of living honorably, and 7 days of grief they'd weaponized against me. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled on my jacket. Behind me, Perry's voice carried smugness like cologne. Smart choice, Harold. We'll help you look at places tomorrow. I didn't respond, couldn't respond. The door closed behind me with a soft click that seemed to echo through my chest. The evening air bit at my face as I stood on my own front porch, looking back at windows glowing warm and welcoming. My house, my life, my family, former family. I walked to my car, each step measured and deliberate. As I drove away, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I was done looking backward. Something new was taking shape in the space where my heart used to be. Back in my study, I cleared the dinner plates with mechanical precision. Sienna and Perry had left 20 minutes ago, their car doors slamming like gunshots in the quiet evening. Now silence pressed against the walls of my house. Our house, Martha's and mine. I sank into the leather armchair that had been my refuge for 15 years. The graduation photo on my desk caught the lamplight. Sienna at 22, radiant in cap and gown, her arms wrapped around Martha and me. $89,000. That's what her education cost me. Every semester, every dormitory fee, every textbook and meal plan. I transferred the money gladly, watching my savings shrink as my daughter's future expanded. May 2013. The university auditorium was packed, but I only saw her. When they called her name, Sienna Marie Butler, Martha squeezed my hand so tight her wedding ring pressed into my palm. Our daughter walked across that stage like she owned the world. Afterward, in the parking lot, Sienna had thrown her arms around my neck, tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe you did this for me, Dad." Her voice broke with emotion. $89,000. I looked up the receipts you kept. You gave me everything. You're worth every penny, sweetheart. I promise I'll take care of you and Mom when you're older. I swear on my life, Dad, family takes care of family. Family takes care of family. The words echoed now like a cruel joke. I reached for the photo, tracing Sienna's young face through the glass. 5 years later, she'd needed another bailout. $65,000 this time for a house down payment. She and Perry couldn't qualify for the mortgage alone. Too much debt, insufficient credit. They'd sat in my living room, Sienna's eyes red from crying. "We'll pay you back, Dad, every dollar, with interest." Perry had nodded along, though his gratitude felt thin even then. But Sienna's desperation was real. She'd wanted that house like she'd once wanted her degree, with complete, consuming need. I'd written the check the next morning, 2 years ago, their wedding. $23,000 for the country club reception, the flowers, the photographer. Martha was already showing signs of the illness that would take her, but she'd insisted on the expense. "She's our only daughter, Harold. Let's give her a day she'll never forget." During the father-daughter dance, Sienna had whispered in my ear, "Thank you for everything, Dad, for making this perfect. I'm so lucky to have you." Perfect! The word tasted bitter now. Standing, I walked to the filing cabinet where I kept financial records. Martha had always teased me about my meticulous bookkeeping, but numbers don't lie. They tell stories more honest than promises. College, $89,000. House down payment, $65,000. Wedding, $23,000. Smaller loans over the years for cars, emergencies. Perry's failed construction business startup, $38,000, $215,000. Nearly 2/3 of my life savings poured into my daughter's happiness. Each check written with love, each transfer made with pride. A distant memory surfaced. Sienna at 7, wobbling on her first bicycle in our front yard. I'd held the seat steady, running alongside as she found her balance. "We'll always be a family, right, Daddy?" "Always, sweetheart. Family takes care of family." Even then, she'd understood the code we lived by, or I'd thought she had. My phone buzzed against the desk. A text from Sienna. "Thanks for understanding, Dad. This is really for the best. We'll help you find a nice place tomorrow." Understanding, as if I'd agreed to anything, as if being ordered from my own home was reasonable behavior, from the daughter I'd sacrificed everything for. I stared at the phone until the screen went dark, then set it aside. Something cold was settling in my chest, replacing the hurt with something harder. More focused, they thought they knew Harold Butler, the generous father, the grieving widower, the easy mark. They'd calculated wrong. 35 years in banking had taught me things about money and leverage they couldn't imagine. Opening my laptop, I began typing. Time to see exactly what my investments had purchased. Dawn found me staring at the ceiling, Martha's pillow still indented beside me. Sleep had been impossible. By 7 a.m., I'd showered, dressed in my best Navy suit, the one I'd worn to client meetings for 23 years, and made a decision. Desert Community Bank sat in downtown Scottsdale like a fortress of glass and steel. I'd worked in this building until my retirement 3 years ago, knew every corridor, every face. Walking through the lobby felt like stepping back in time. Harold Butler. The receptionist's smile was genuine. Haven't seen you in months. Here to see someone? James Morrison, if he's available. Tell him it's about a financial consultation. 20 minutes later, I sat across from James in his corner office. Same oak desk, same family photos, same meticulous organization I remembered. James had been my colleague for 15 years, a careful man with an eye for detail. You look well, Harold. He poured coffee from a thermal carafe, though I was sorry to hear about Martha. She was a lovely woman. Thank you. I accepted the cup, feeling the familiar weight of business in my hands. I need to understand my financial exposure on some loans I guaranteed. James's expression shifted to professional alertness. Of course. Which accounts are you concerned about? My daughter's mortgage and anything related to my son-in-law's business ventures. Fingers dancing across his keyboard, James pulled up files that made his eyebrows rise incrementally. Well, since you co-signed on Sienna's original mortgage and the home equity line, I can certainly discuss your liability. Home equity line? I hadn't known about that one. The mortgage payments have been irregular for 8 months, James continued, scrolling through data. Currently 60 days behind. That puts your credit rating at risk. 60 days, my chest tightened. What about Perry's business accounts? James's pause told me everything before he spoke. The equipment loan you guaranteed for Morgan Construction Services defaulted 4 months ago. $78,000 in principal, plus accumulated interest and fees. $78,000. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Harold, I have to ask, are you aware of their current financial situation? Apparently not as aware as I should be. The home equity line was maxed out 6 months ago, $45,000 drawn against the property, combined with the mortgage arrears and Perry's business default. James leaned forward. Your liability exposure is significant. Over $120,000 if they continue defaulting. The numbers hit like physical blows. Not only had they burned through the money I'd given them, they'd borrowed against it and failed to pay that back too. There's more. James's voice dropped. Perry filed for business bankruptcy 2 weeks ago. It protects him from creditors, but your guarantees remain active. 2 weeks ago, right around the time they'd started planning their ambush, James, hypothetically speaking, if these accounts went into full default, what would happen to the property? Foreclosure proceedings within 90 days. The house would be sold to satisfy the debts. Given current market values and the amount owed, he calculated quickly, there might be 10 to 15,000 equity remaining after all liens are satisfied. 10,000 from a house I'd put 65,000 down on. Standing, I shook James's hand with the same firmness I'd used in 1,000 business meetings. I appreciate your candor. This gives me the information I need to make some decisions. Harold? James's voice stopped me at the door. If you need any documentation of these accounts for legal purposes, I can prepare a comprehensive liability report. That would be very helpful. Thank you. Walking to my car, my steps felt different, purposeful. The morning sun was bright and warm, promising a beautiful Arizona day. Sitting behind the wheel, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found what I was looking for. 3 years retired, but I still remembered which attorneys specialized in financial recovery and estate planning. Sienna and Perry thought they'd cornered a grieving old man. Instead, they'd awakened something much more dangerous, a former banking analyst who now understood exactly how precarious their position really was. The afternoon sun slanted across my desk as I spread out the documents James had prepared. 3 hours since leaving the bank, and my methodical banker's mind was finally taking control. I'd arranged the papers chronologically, loan agreements, payment histories, default notices, creating a timeline of financial disaster. My old calculator sat beside a legal pad filled with figures. 35 years of analyzing credit risks had taught me to read between the lines of financial statements. The story these documents told was worse than I'd imagined. Perry's construction business had collapsed 6 months ago. Not gradually, catastrophically. A $50,000 equipment loan became $78,000 with penalties and compound interest. He'd used personal credit cards to keep the business afloat, turning family money into gambling chips. 4 different credit cards, $23,000 in revolving debt across all of them. The minimum payments alone consumed 40% of their monthly income, assuming Perry found steady work, but it was the mortgage situation that revealed their true desperation. Sienna's house, the one I'd provided a $65,000 down payment for, was 3 months behind on payments. Foreclosure proceedings could begin in 60 days. There was more. A home equity line of credit I'd never known about, maxed out at $45,000. They'd borrowed against the house to cover Perry's business debts, then borrowed more to cover the borrowing. I leaned back in my chair, watching dust motes dance in the sunlight. The numbers painted a picture of people drowning in debt, making increasingly desperate choices. Perry's bankruptcy filing 2 weeks ago protected him from business creditors, but my guarantees remained active. They needed my house. Not wanted. Needed. Their cramped apartment wasn't preference. It was all they could afford while juggling minimum payments on cascading debts. My phone buzzed, a text from Sienna. "Dad, we found a lovely assisted living place in Tempe, much more appropriate than that big empty house. Can we schedule a tour tomorrow?" Much more appropriate. The clinical language couldn't mask the urgency. They weren't thinking about my comfort or happiness. They were calculating square footage against mortgage payments, my house against their survival. Standing, I walked to the filing cabinet where Martha and I had kept important papers. Behind the insurance policies, I found what I was looking for, copies of every loan agreement I'd co-signed over the years. My liability exposure was staggering. If Perry's business debts went to judgment, creditors could pursue me for the full amount. If Sienna's mortgage foreclosed, the deficiency balance would become my responsibility. Conservative estimate, $140,000 in potential claims. But liability worked both ways. As co-signer, I had legal rights. Rights to demand financial information. Rights to protect my interests. Rights they'd never expected me to exercise. I pulled out my laptop and began typing. Time to see exactly what those rights entitled me to. The Arizona revised statutes were quite specific about guarantor protections. Section 47-3605 was particularly interesting. Co-signers could demand immediate payment or dissolution of guaranteed obligations under certain circumstances. Circumstances like concealment of additional debts, like using guaranteed credit for unauthorized purposes, like attempting to defraud the guarantor. My phone rang. "Sienna, again? Hi, Dad. Did you get my text about the tour?" I did. My voice sounded different to my own ears. Calmer, more controlled. "Wonderful. They have availability next week. You could be settled in by month's end." Month's end. 23 days from now. "Sienna, I need to ask you something. Are you and Perry having financial difficulties?" Silence stretched between us like a held breath. "Why would you ask that, Dad?" "Because I care about your welfare, as your father and as someone who's helped support your financial decisions over the years. We're fine, just looking for more space, for our future." "Future? Built on my house, my money, my destroyed trust. I see. Well, we'll talk more soon about the tour tomorrow. I'll let you know." After hanging up, I sat staring at the wall where Martha's college degree hung beside mine. She'd always been the trusting one, the one who saw the best in people. But she'd also been the one who insisted I keep meticulous records of every financial transaction. "Trust but verify," she used to say, especially with family money. Now I understood why. Tuesday morning brought the call I'd been expecting. 8:45, precisely the time desperate people contact family members, early enough to seem urgent, late enough to avoid accusations of panic. My coffee was still steaming when the phone rang. Sienna's name on the display brought a smile I hadn't felt in weeks. "Good morning, Sienna." "Dad?" Her voice carried an unfamiliar tremor. "I hope I'm not calling too early." Not at all. I've been up since 6. I settled back in my chair, watching steam rise from my mug. What can I do for you? A pause, then carefully chosen words. I need to discuss something important with you. About our conversation Sunday. Which part? Well, about the house situation and some financial concerns Perry and I are facing. Financial concerns. Such delicate language for catastrophic debt. I'm listening. Dad, we're going through a difficult period. Perry's construction work has been inconsistent, and with some unexpected expenses, her voice faltered. We need help, just temporarily. 15,000 would get us back on track. 15,000, not even enough to catch up their mortgage payments, but probably enough to stave off foreclosure for another month. No, Sienna. Silence stretched between us like a held breath. I'm sorry, what? I said no, I won't be lending you money. Dad, I don't think you understand. This isn't for vacation or luxury. We could lose our house. Could lose. They were 3 months behind. They would lose it within 60 days unless someone intervened. Someone like their generous father who'd always rescued them before. I understand perfectly. But you've always helped us. When I needed college money, when we bought the house, the wedding. Always helped. $215,000 worth of help, to be precise. That was then. Dad, what's wrong with you? Panic crept into her voice. This isn't like you. We're family. Family, the word she'd forgotten when ordering me to pack my bags and disappear. Are we? Of course we are. Dad, please. I know Sunday was tense, but we can work through this. We just need 15,000 to catch up payments and... The answer is no, Sienna. I don't understand. Her voice broke slightly. You have the money. You know you do. And we'll pay it back. We always have. Actually, they never had. Not once. Every loan became a gift through their practiced combination of gratitude and selective memory. No means no. Dad, please. Real desperation now, the facade crumbling. The mortgage company called yesterday. We have 2 weeks before they start foreclosure proceedings. I'm begging you. 2 weeks. My timeline was more accurate. They had less than that before the acceleration clause kicked in and the entire balance became due immediately. Have you considered downsizing? Perhaps something more appropriate to your current income? Dad, you can't be serious. That house is our home, our future. You helped us buy it. Helped them buy it? $65,000 down, my signature on their guarantee, my credit backing their dreams. Sometimes circumstances change. What circumstances? Dad, talk to me. What's really going on? What was going on? Their loving father had discovered exactly how much their affection was worth. Market rate, apparently, was one large house and immediate disappearance from their lives. I've made my decision. This is about Sunday, isn't it? About what Perry said? Her voice pitched higher. Dad, he didn't mean it. We were stressed, scared about money, and... Goodbye, Sienna. Dad, wait! I hung up. The phone immediately began ringing again. I turned off the ringer and returned to my newspaper. The financial section had an interesting article about the rising foreclosure rates in Arizona. Apparently, many families were discovering that living beyond their means had consequences. Outside, a mockingbird was singing in Martha's rose garden. The roses were blooming beautifully this year. Martha would have been pleased. She'd always said the garden thrived when it was properly tended and ruthlessly pruned. Sometimes the most loving thing you could do was cut away the diseased branches. My phone buzzed with a text. Dad, please call me back. We need to talk about this. I deleted the message and poured myself another cup of coffee. It was going to be a beautiful day. 2 days after my refusal, the notifications began arriving. Credit inquiries on accounts where I held cosigner liability. As guarantor, the system automatically flagged me when they applied for emergency loans. 3 different banks, all denied within hours. Wednesday afternoon found me parked across from Perry's construction site, observing their unraveling through my windshield. He stood beside a half-built foundation, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing frantically. Even from this distance, his agitation was unmistakable. His supervisor approached twice during my 20-minute observation. Both conversations ended with Perry turning away, shoulders rigid with frustration. A man under pressure makes mistakes, and construction work doesn't forgive carelessness. Thursday morning brought me to Common Ground's coffee shop, a local favorite among banking professionals. I'd cultivated relationships here for 30 years, relationships that now provided valuable intelligence. Harold Butler, as I live and breathe. Margaret Walsh from First National slid into the booth across from me. Haven't seen you since Martha's service. How are you holding up? Day by day, Margaret. The house feels empty, but keeping busy helps. Of course. She stirred her latte thoughtfully. Speaking of keeping busy, we had an interesting application yesterday. Your son-in-law, actually. Perry Morgan. I kept my expression neutral. Oh? High-risk case. Debt-to-income ratio approaching 60%. Recent business bankruptcy. Multiple inquiries across town. Margaret shook her head. We couldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Neither could anyone else, from what I hear. 60% debt-to-income. That was worse than my calculations had suggested. Family finances can be complicated, I offered. This went beyond complicated. The application showed 3 months of missed mortgage payments, maxed credit cards. The works. She leaned forward conspiratorially. Between you and me, Harold, they're looking at foreclosure inside 2 weeks. I felt bad turning them down, but we have shareholders to consider. 2 weeks. My timeline had been optimistic. That's unfortunate. The sad part? If they'd had a qualified cosigner, someone with real assets and clean credit, we might have worked something out. But they came in alone, desperate as church mice. Qualified cosigner. The irony wasn't lost on me. After Margaret left, I sat finishing my coffee and considering the information. Perry and Sienna were discovering that financial reputation, once damaged, couldn't be quickly repaired. Trust, like credit scores, took years to build and minutes to destroy. Driving home, I passed their small apartment complex. Sienna's car sat in the lot, hood raised, steam rising from the engine. Another expense they couldn't afford. She stood beside it, phone in hand, probably calling repair shops she couldn't pay. Back in my study, I pulled up the credit monitoring service I'd maintained on accounts I guaranteed. The activity over the past 48 hours painted a picture of mounting desperation. 7 loan applications, 7 denials. Each inquiry lowered their credit score, making the next application even less likely to succeed. My phone buzzed, another text from Sienna. Dad, can we please talk? I know you're angry about Sunday, but we're family. Families help each other through difficult times. Families help each other? Where had that sentiment been when they'd ordered me to pack and leave? I deleted the message without responding. The evening news featured a segment about rising foreclosure rates in Arizona. Young families stretched too thin, living beyond their means, discovering that credit wasn't infinite. The reporter interviewed a housing counselor who spoke about early intervention, family support systems, and the importance of honest communication about financial difficulties. Honest communication. If only Perry and Sienna had tried that approach instead of manipulation and ultimatums. My phone rang. Sienna, again. I watched it ring 7 times before voicemail picked up. A minute later, the notification chimed. Dad, it's me. Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot Sunday. Maybe Perry was too direct about the house situation, but we're really struggling here. I've never asked you for anything without paying it back. This is different. This is our home, our future. Please call me back. Never asked for anything without paying it back. Apparently, she'd forgotten the $73,000 in unpaid loans I'd written off as gifts over the years. Our future, built on my sacrifice, my generosity, my willingness to bankroll their dreams. Now that the bank was closed, they were discovering what their future actually looked like. I poured myself a scotch and settled into Martha's favorite armchair. Outside, the desert evening was painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, beautiful and merciless, like the landscape itself. Friday evening brought the call I'd been waiting for, 7:30, precisely when desperate men abandon pride and reach for their last remaining lifeline. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Harold Butler. Harold, Perry's voice carried the strain of a week's worth of rejections. We need to talk. I'm listening. Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot Sunday. Maybe I was too direct about the house situation, but we're family, and families help each other through difficult times. Family. How quickly that word emerged when money was needed. Is that what we are, Perry? Of course. Harold, listen to me. We're in serious trouble here. The banks, none of them will work with us. Something about our debt-to-income ratio. Credit inquiries. I don't understand all the financial terminology. I understood it perfectly. 60% debt to income was a death sentence in current lending markets. Financial terminology can be confusing. Harold, we need $15,000. Just temporarily. We'll sign papers, pay interest, whatever you want. But if we don't get help soon, we lose everything. Everything. Their house, their credit, their comfortable assumptions about my endless generosity. As I recall, Perry, you told me to pack my suitcases and never come back. Silence stretched across the connection like a taut wire. That was a misunderstanding. I was stressed about the house being too big for you, worried about your safety rattling around alone in all that space. Rattling around, even his apologies contained condescension. Interesting interpretation. Harold, please. Martha would have wanted you to help us. She loved Sienna, loved our family. She wouldn't want to see us lose our home. Martha, they were using my dead wife as leverage. The audacity was almost admirable. Martha is gone, Perry. I make my own decisions now. What's happened to you? His voice pitched higher, desperation bleeding through attempted control. This isn't the Harold I know. The Harold who helped with college, the wedding, the house down payment. The Harold who wrote checks without question, who accepted gratitude as payment, who never demanded accountability. That Harold had died Sunday evening. Perhaps you never knew me as well as you thought. This is about Sunday, isn't it? About what I said. Panic crept into his tone. Harold, I apologize. I was wrong. I should never have suggested you leave your own house. Should never have suggested. Not shouldn't have meant it, but shouldn't have said it. Your apology is noted. Then you'll help us? No. Why not? The question exploded across the line. You have the money. You know you do. 300,000 in savings, maybe more. What's 15,000 to you? 300,000, close to my actual balance. Someone had been researching my finances. How do you know my account balance, Perry? Sienna mentioned... Look, that doesn't matter. What matters is you can save us, and you're choosing not to. Choosing not to, as if generosity was an obligation rather than a gift. You're right, I am choosing. You son of... He caught himself, breathing hard. Harold, I'm trying to be respectful here, but you're pushing me. We're talking about your daughter's future, your grandchildren's inheritance. Grandchildren that didn't exist, from a daughter who'd ordered me banished. Are you threatening me, Perry? I'm explaining reality. If we lose this house, if our credit is destroyed, if we're forced into bankruptcy, that affects everyone, including you. Everyone except the man they'd tried to exile. I think our conversation is finished. Wait. Harold, just tell me why. Why won't you help us? What did we do to deserve this? What did they do? They'd calculated my grief as weakness, my love as vulnerability, my generosity as guaranteed income. They'd weaponized Martha's funeral as leverage for financial gain. Perhaps you should ask yourself why your loan applications keep getting rejected. Another silence, longer this time. When Perry spoke again, his voice carried a different quality. Suspicion. What do you mean by that? Exactly what I said. Harold, what aren't you telling me? Everything. My professional network, my cosigner rights, my strategic patience, my detailed understanding of their financial desperation. Good evening, Perry. Harold, don't you dare hang up on... I disconnected the call and turned off the ringer. Outside my study window, the desert evening painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold, beautiful and unforgiving, like justice itself. My phone buzzed with a text message. Perry, this isn't over, old man. Not by a long shot. I smiled and deleted the message. He was right about one thing. This was just the beginning. Saturday morning brought clarity about my next move. Perry's threats had crossed a line that required appropriate response. If he wanted to play hardball, I'd show him what professional-level strategy looked like. My first stop was the public library's Business Research Center. 23 years in banking had taught me that every company leaves a paper trail, and Desert Vista Construction, LLC, would be no exception. The Arizona Corporation Commission database revealed interesting details. Desert Vista had filed late payment notices with 3 subcontractors in the past 4 months. Cash flow problems, permit delays on 2 municipal projects, a workers' compensation claim still pending investigation. I printed the relevant pages and moved to the construction industry databases. The picture grew clearer. Rising material costs, labor shortages, and delayed municipal payments were squeezing small contractors across Arizona. Desert Vista was swimming in troubled waters. At Common Grounds Coffee Shop, I encountered Bob Henley, a former client who'd retired from the city planning department. Our conversation started with pleasantries about Martha's memorial service and evolved into industry discussion. "The construction business is brutal right now," Bob mentioned, stirring his coffee. "Half these small outfits are one project failure away from bankruptcy. I imagine permit compliance is crucial in that environment. More than ever, with all the safety regulations, insurance requirements, worker protection laws, one violation can shut down a project for weeks." Interesting. I made a mental note to research Desert Vista's compliance record more thoroughly. "Any particular companies giving the department headaches?" Bob lowered his voice. "Well, between you and me, there's been some concerns about Desert Vista construction. Nothing actionable yet, but their safety protocols seem loose, and their insurance documentation has been late on several occasions." Safety protocols, insurance documentation. In the construction industry, these weren't merely bureaucratic requirements. They were the difference between profitable projects and regulatory nightmares. Back home, I spent Sunday morning cross-referencing public records with industry reports. Desert Vista's financial stress was more severe than I'd initially assessed. They owed $67,000 to a concrete supplier, $42,000 to an electrical subcontractor, and had missed 3 insurance premium payments. But the most interesting discovery came from the Better Business Bureau database. 2 complaints filed in the past month, both regarding incomplete work and payment disputes, not enough to destroy a company, but sufficient to raise questions about reliability. I pulled out my old business contact list. Retirement hadn't severed all professional relationships. David Marsh at Southwest Insurance Group handled workers' compensation for most area contractors. Sarah Adams at Municipal Licensing had processed permit applications for decades. Both owed me favors from our banking days. By Sunday afternoon, I'd made discreet inquiries with 3 different agencies. Not accusations, simply concerned questions about industry compliance and risk management. Professional due diligence, the kind any experienced business analyst might pursue. "David, I'm doing some informal consulting work, and Desert Vista Construction came up as a potential partner," I'd explained to the insurance executive. "Their coverage seems adequate, but I wanted to verify their claims, history, and payment status." "Harold, between us, they're on thin ice. 2 late payments, and we're required to notify their bonding company. 1 more missed premium, and their coverage lapses." Coverage lapse. In the construction business, that meant immediate project shutdown and potential criminal liability for any workplace injuries. Sarah Adams at Municipal Licensing had been equally informative. Desert Vista, they've had permit issues lately. Nothing major, but enough to suggest management problems. Their foreman submitted incomplete safety plans twice, last month. Incomplete safety plans. Another red flag that regulatory authorities would watch carefully. I spent Sunday evening synthesizing my research. Desert Vista Construction was a company under pressure, walking a tightrope of regulatory compliance while struggling with cash flow problems. They needed every project to run smoothly, every permit to process without delay, every inspection to pass cleanly. Unfortunately for Perry, companies in precarious positions often found that small problems became large disasters very quickly, especially when those problems received the proper attention from regulatory authorities. I prepared a simple email to Bob Henley. "Bob, enjoyed our coffee conversation yesterday. Thought you might find these industry compliance reports interesting, particularly the section on safety protocol violations. Purely informational, of course." Attached were Desert Vista's public records showing their recent permit delays and safety documentation issues. Nothing confidential, nothing fabricated, simply publicly available information organized in a professionally compelling format. The email would reach Bob Monday morning. He'd review the materials, probably share them with his former colleagues in planning and safety inspection. Normal information sharing among professionals concerned about public safety. Within a week, Desert Vista Construction would find themselves facing the kind of regulatory scrutiny that could shut down projects and drain cash reserves. Perry had threatened me. Now he'd learn what real power looked like. Monday brought the news I'd been waiting for. Perry's pickup truck sat in their driveway at 3:15 p.m., 2 hours earlier than his usual return from Desert Vista Construction. Through my rearview mirror, parked at the corner coffee stand, I watched him sit motionless behind the wheel for nearly 10 minutes. When he finally emerged, his shoulders carried the defeated slump of a man whose world had just collapsed. The regulatory scrutiny I'd orchestrated had worked faster than expected. Desert Vista's permit problems had escalated into a complete project shutdown, forcing immediate layoffs. Perry disappeared inside their small house. Within minutes, raised voices carried through the thin walls and open windows. Even from the street, his agitation was unmistakable. Sharp gestures visible through the front window, pacing that made the whole structure seem to vibrate with tension. Tuesday morning arrived with Sienna's scream. I'd positioned myself at the neighborhood park, ostensibly reading the morning paper while monitoring their house from a discreet distance. The sound cut through the desert air like breaking glass. Pure anguished disbelief, Perry had finally confessed. $78,000 in hidden business debt, the bankruptcy filing, the cascade of lies that had been sustaining their lifestyle for months. Through their kitchen window, I could see Sienna's silhouette gesticulating wildly, her movements sharp and desperate. Perry stood rigid, hands spread in what appeared to be defensive explanation. Their domestic crisis played out like a silent film, all fury and betrayal, without audible dialogue. Sienna stormed outside, phone pressed to her ear. Her first call lasted 3 minutes, probably her sister in California. The second was shorter, more desperate. By the fourth call, she was pacing the driveway, voice carrying across the morning stillness. "Mom, I know it's early, but we need help. Serious help. Perry lost his job and—" "No, there's more, much more." She disappeared back inside, only to emerge 10 minutes later with another frantic phone call. This pattern continued throughout the morning, desperate outreach to anyone who might offer financial salvation. By noon, Perry had made 2 trips to the liquor store and 1 to what appeared to be a pawn shop, based on the small boxes he carried from the house. Selling personal items, the classic desperation move of people drowning in debt. I relocated to the public library parking lot for the afternoon shift, maintaining visual contact while appearing to conduct normal errands. Their crisis was accelerating beyond even my optimistic projections. Sienna's friend Rebecca arrived around 2 p.m., staying for an hour. Through the open front door, I could hear fragments of emotional conversation. Tears, pleas for advice. The hollow echo of someone discovering their safety net had disappeared. When Rebecca left, her expression carried the uncomfortable mixture of sympathy and relief that marks someone grateful not to be asked for money they don't have. Evening brought the real breakdown. Perry and Sienna's argument had moved to their front porch, voices raised beyond any pretense of privacy. Standing in my own front yard, ostensibly watering Martha's roses, I could hear every bitter word. "You bankrupted us." Sienna's voice cracked with exhaustion and fury. $78,000, Perry. How do you hide $78,000? I was trying to save the business. Everything I did was for our future. Our future? What future? We lose the house in 6 days. 6 days, Perry. Your father could help us if he wanted to. 1 phone call, 1 transfer, and this whole nightmare disappears. My father? Sienna's laugh held no humor. You ordered him to pack his bags and never come back. You think he's forgotten that? Perry's response was lost in the sound of their front door slamming. Sienna remained on the porch, sobbing into her hands with the raw despair of someone whose world had imploded in a single day. I coiled the garden hose and headed inside, satisfied with the day's intelligence gathering. My strategy was exceeding all expectations. Their marriage, already strained by financial pressure, was disintegrating under the weight of betrayal and hopelessness. Phase 2 of my plan was complete. They'd lost their income, exhausted their credit, and now faced the destruction of their most fundamental relationship, trust between husband and wife. Tomorrow would bring phase 3, but tonight I'd pour myself a scotch and appreciate the elegant precision of watching people reap exactly what they'd sown. The desert evening painted the sky crimson and gold. Justice, it seemed, wore the most beautiful colors. Wednesday evening brought the visitors I'd been expecting. Through my front window, I watched them approach, Sienna clutching Perry's arm for support, both moving with the defeated shuffle of people who'd run out of options. The doorbell rang once, a tentative, almost apologetic sound. I took my time answering, adjusting my tie, checking my appearance in the hallway mirror. When dealing with desperate people, timing and presentation were everything. "Dad!" Sienna's eyes were red-rimmed from crying. "Thank you for seeing us." "Sienna." "Perry." I stepped aside, allowing them entry but making no welcoming gestures. "Please come in." They followed me to the living room, where I took my customary chair. Martha's chair remained empty beside me, a silent reminder of what they'd cost me. Perry and Sienna perched on the edge of the couch like children called to the principal's office. "I suppose you have something to discuss." Sienna's composure cracked immediately. "Dad, we're in serious trouble. I know we made mistakes, said things we shouldn't have, but—" "Mistakes." I repeated the word with clinical precision. Interesting choice of terminology. "Harold, I need to apologize." Perry's voice carried the strain of swallowed pride. "What I said at dinner, about packing your bags, that was completely inappropriate. I was stressed about our financial situation and took it out on you." "Our financial situation." Even in apology, he was rewriting history. "You were stressed," I acknowledged. "About what, specifically?" Perry's jaw tightened. The question forced him to reveal weakness he'd preferred to hide. "Business problems. Debt issues I should have discussed with Sienna earlier." "How much debt, Perry?" The silence stretched uncomfortably. Sienna looked at her husband with fresh pain. Even now he was reluctant to confess the full scope of his deception. $78,000, Perry finally admitted. "That's substantial." I kept my voice professionally neutral. "And your employment situation?" "I lost my job. Monday. Construction industry problems." Construction industry problems. Not regulatory scrutiny triggered by concerned citizens sharing public safety information. Perry still didn't understand the true scope of his predicament. "Dad, please!" Sienna's voice broke. "We lose the house in 5 days. I've called everyone. My sister, college friends, anyone who might help. Nobody has that kind of money available on short notice." "Nobody except the father she'd helped evict from his own home. And you thought of me. Your family." Tears streamed down her face. "You're all I have left since Mom died. She would have wanted us to stay together, work through our problems." "Martha, they were invoking my dead wife's memory to leverage sympathy from me. Your mother valued honesty above all else. She kept meticulous records, insisted on transparency in all financial matters." Sienna missed the implication, but Perry's eyes narrowed slightly. He was beginning to sense something beneath my calm responses. "Dad, I know I haven't been the perfect daughter, but I'm still your little girl. Please don't abandon me when I need you most." Your little girl, the same child who'd watched silently while her husband ordered me to pack my belongings and disappear. "What specifically are you asking me to do?" "Lend us money," Perry said quickly. 40,000 would cover the mortgage arrears and give us breathing room to find new employment. 40,000, a fraction of what they actually owed, but enough to postpone their day of reckoning. That's a substantial sum. "We'll pay you back," Sienna promised, with interest. "Whatever terms you want. We'll sign legal documents, put the house up as collateral." "Put the house up as collateral?" "The house I'd already provided the down payment for, on the mortgage I'd already guaranteed." "I see." I leaned back in my chair, studying their desperate faces. "And if I refuse?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Sienna's shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. Perry stared at the floor, pride and desperation warring in his expression. "Then we lose everything," Sienna whispered. "Our home, our marriage, our future." "Our future, built on lies, sustained by deception, collapsing under the weight of consequences they'd never anticipated." I stood slowly, walking to the window that overlooked Martha's garden. The roses were blooming magnificently this year. She'd always said that proper pruning was essential for healthy growth. This is quite a predicament you found yourselves in. Behind me, I could hear Sienna's quiet weeping, Perry's labored breathing. They were waiting for my decision, hanging on every word, completely dependent on my mercy. For the first time in weeks, I felt the deep satisfaction of perfect justice. "Before I consider your request," I said, turning from the window, "I think you should understand exactly how you arrived at this moment." Sienna wiped her eyes, confusion flickering across her tear-stained face. "What do you mean?" "I mean that very little of what's happened to you has been coincidental." I walked to my desk, opening the center drawer where I'd kept detailed records of every strategic decision. Perry's expression shifted from defeat to wariness as I pulled out a manila folder, thick with documents. "Let me show you something interesting." I spread the timeline across the coffee table between us. Monday, March 18th. I visited my former colleague, James Morrison, at Desert Community Bank. Perry's face went pale. "You did what?" "As co-signer on your loans, I had every legal right to review your financial status. James was quite thorough in his assessment." I pulled out the printed credit reports. 78,000 in business debt, 3 months behind on mortgage payments, credit cards maxed at 60% of available limits. Sienna stared at the documents. "Dad, I don't understand." "I conducted a professional risk analysis of your situation. 23 years in banking taught me to recognize when clients were beyond salvage." I turned to another page. "Your debt-to-income ratio was approaching 65%, statistically impossible to sustain." "You were analyzing us?" Perry's voice carried growing horror. When Sienna called requesting $15,000, I'd been expecting it for days. The timing was predictable, based on your payment schedules and cash flow projections. You planned to refuse?" "Perry, you ordered me to pack my suitcases and never return. Did you imagine there would be no consequences for that level of cruelty?" I moved to the next set of documents. The banking community in Scottsdale is remarkably interconnected. Margaret Walsh at First National, David Adams at Community Trust, Sarah Morrison at Southwest Credit Union, all former clients of mine. Perry was standing now, his face flushed with understanding rage. "You blacklisted us." "I shared legitimate concerns about risk factors and payment reliability. Everything I discussed was publicly available information. You destroyed our credit applications. I provided professional insight to colleagues making prudent business decisions." Sienna was staring at me as if seeing a stranger. "Dad, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that Desert Vista Construction was already vulnerable before I shared workplace safety concerns with Bob Henley at City Planning. Their permit compliance was questionable. Their insurance payments were late. Their safety protocols needed review." "You got me fired." Perry's words came out as a whisper. "I ensured that regulatory authorities had complete information about potential public safety risks." Desert Vista's subsequent problems were entirely their own doing. I pulled out the final document, my handwritten strategic timeline. Every phone call, every refusal, every coincidence was calculated for maximum psychological impact at optimal timing. "You planned all of this?" Sienna's voice broke. "From the moment Perry told me to pack my bags, yes. I spent 35 years analyzing financial vulnerabilities and strategic pressure points. Applying that expertise to your situation was simply professional methodology." Perry lunged forward, grabbing the papers. "You manipulative old—" "Careful, Perry." My voice carried steel. "You're still in my house, requesting my help." He froze, documents trembling in his hands as he read my methodical planning notes. The dates, the strategic decisions, the professional contacts leveraged, the systematic elimination of their options. "You destroyed our marriage." Sienna's accusation hung in the air. "Your marriage was collateral damage. The primary objective was appropriate consequences for unconscionable behavior. We're your family. Family members don't order each other to disappear after 38 years of service and sacrifice. You redefined our relationship that Sunday evening." Sienna collapsed back onto the couch, overwhelmed by the scope of betrayal. "How could you do this to your own daughter? How could you stand silently while your husband ordered me to abandon my own home?" Perry threw the papers across the room, scattering my careful documentation. You're a monster. I'm a professional who applied systematic thinking to a personal problem. You threatened someone you thought was helpless. You discovered otherwise. The room fell silent except for Sienna's quiet sobbing. They were processing the magnitude of being completely outmaneuvered by someone they'd underestimated. Now, I said, returning to my chair with the calm authority of complete victory, shall we discuss the terms under which I might consider helping you? Perry gathered the scattered papers with trembling hands, his face flushed with rage and humiliation. Sienna remained collapsed on the couch, processing the magnitude of her father's strategic masterpiece. These are my terms, I said, returning to my chair, with the calm authority of complete victory. You wanted to discuss assistance. Let's discuss it properly. Terms? Sienna's voice was barely a whisper. You ordered me to pack my suitcases and disappear. Now you need my help to survive. That requires acknowledging some fundamental realities about our relationship going forward. Perry looked up from the documents, hatred burning in his eyes but tempered by desperate necessity. What do you want? First, a written apology. Public acknowledgement that your treatment of me was inappropriate and cruel. You'll submit it to the neighborhood newsletter and post it on social media. You want us to humiliate ourselves publicly? I want you to correct the record about my character and worth. Your neighbors watched you disrespect a grieving widower. They should know you recognize that behavior was unacceptable. Sienna nodded slowly. Okay, we'll write an apology. Second, you'll treat me with the respect and courtesy appropriate for the family patriarch. No more dismissive comments, no more financial presumptions, no more orders about my living arrangements. Yes, Harold, Perry said through gritted teeth. Third, any assistance I provide comes with conditions. You'll follow my financial guidance, attend counseling for your marriage problems, and maintain employment that I approve of. You want to control our lives. I want to ensure my investment isn't wasted on people who haven't learned from their mistakes. I stood and walked to my desk, pulling out my checkbook. The sound of the pen scratching across paper was the only noise in the room. I'm prepared to provide $25,000, enough to prevent foreclosure and give you breathing room to rebuild your lives properly. Sienna's eyes widened. 25,000, but we need 40 to catch up completely. You need to learn the difference between rescue and assistance. I'm not restoring your previous lifestyle. I'm preventing total collapse while you construct something more sustainable. I tore off the check and set it on the coffee table. This comes with monthly progress reports, financial transparency, marriage counseling attendance, employment verification, respectful communication. Perry stared at the check like it was both salvation and poison. And if we refuse these terms, then you leave my house and solve your problems without my involvement. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. They were calculating their options, weighing pride against survival, dignity against necessity. We accept, Sienna said finally. All of it. Perry's jaw worked like he was chewing glass, but he nodded. Yes, we accept your terms. Excellent. I picked up the check and held it just beyond their reach. You'll have this tomorrow, after you've written and submitted the public apology. Consider tonight your opportunity to reflect on how dramatically your circumstances have changed. I walked them to the front door, their defeated postures a stark contrast to the arrogant couple who'd tried to exile me 2 weeks ago. One final thought, I said as they stepped onto the porch. You assumed I was weak because I was grieving, generous because I was loving, helpless because I was older. You confused kindness with stupidity and patience with powerlessness. Perry turned back, his face twisted with impotent rage. This isn't over, Harold. You're absolutely right. It's not over. It's just beginning under new management. I closed the door and returned to the living room, gathering the scattered documents from my strategic timeline. Outside, their car started and drove away, carrying 2 people who'd learned that cruelty has consequences. In my study, I opened Martha's photo and smiled at her gentle face. I think you'd be proud, I told her. They wanted me gone, but I'm still here, and now they know exactly who they're dealing with. The house settled into comfortable silence around me. Justice, I discovered, was a dish best served systematically. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.